substance abuse didn't make anyone homeless. Now, does that mean there's not somebody you could find out there who spent all their money on meth and then couldn't pay their rent? Well, yeah, that exists. It's a really small number of people, but that exists. But it's a perfect storm. It's not just the substance abuse disorder. It's economic stuff. It's social support. It's family issues. It's trauma. It's a medical issue. It's that they had a car crash. I know a guy who's been homeless for years and is wheelchair bound and used to run a landscaping company. And it's fantastic. And he will draw you landscapes and they'll blow your mind. But he ran his own company and he was standing on a corner, just standing there, waiting for the light to change, and a car hit him. And his business was lost. He didn't have the reserves to survive and not work. And he's been homeless now all these years. And the guy's really vulnerable. This is another myth that we hear all the time. These homeless people are dangerous. I get this all the time in emails. It's not even like they say, hey, homeless people are dangerous. They just go, how do you expect me to stay safe when I have to see all those homeless people? They're going to kill me. They're going to rob me. They're going to stab me. That's not what's going on. This fella I just told you about has been assaulted so many times he's lost count. He's got traumatic brain injuries from being homeless, from waking up, being kicked, from having his stuff taken. Why him? Because he was there. And he was vulnerable. Homeless folks, people with mental illness, much, much more likely to be victims of violent crimes than to commit them, much more likely. The folks I know that are living out there, most of them, you've never seen them, or you wouldn't know that they were homeless, because they keep it to themselves. They're trying to be invisible. They're very vulnerable. They're just trying to go from A to B and get their thing done with nobody noticing that they have no place to live. It's not, people are embarrassed and ashamed of it. We would say they shouldn't be, right? But you could understand that you might be too. Embarrassed and ashamed that you're homeless. They're not trying to advertise them, but most of them. The people you see who you go, that guy's definitely homeless. And you could just know, have probably been there a really long time and just kind of gave up on, human society, basically. Or there's some severe mental illness and trauma, and they just don't know which way is up. So again, that's a failure. How are there people with severe mental illness, and by the way, some who are veterans, some who are over the age of 62, some who are wheelchair bound, and they're sleeping on the street? That's like, what? Now you might say to me, well, wait a minute, you're supposed to answer that question. You're the guy who works at City Hall. Right? So I maybe should just start with the bad news, which is that I don't really have the answer. I really don't know. I mean, at the bottom of the line, I really don't know. Like, I do know, but I don't. In other words, yeah, we have to build housing. We have to improve the mental health system. We have to train, every police officer, fire department person, not to mention the guy at the gas bill window and the post office, the guy delivering your mail, and everybody needs to be like trauma-informed, mental health first aid, understand homelessness. That's going to take a minute, right? Building housing is going to take a minute. I mean, we broke ground, I think it's like 240-something units just since I've been in the office, and that's not because of me. I'm just using that as a marker of time. But just in the last few months, we've broken ground on like 240, 250 affordable units. Up in the city of LA, they've already got funded, and basically it's in the pipeline, 1,000 units a year for 10 years. That is a really good clip. That's 10,000 units in the city of LA, affordable units. You know what that is? That's 2% of what they need. So in Long Beach, we're actually a little bit better place. They have seen homelessness go like this, and we're seeing kind of flat. Now I know some people are skeptical about that number, and I can talk a little more about that. But one of the reasons that we're in a good place is that we're doing the right things. We're just a little bit behind the curve. There's an old saying, right? When's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. That's also the best time to build affordable housing when you have a homelessness crisis, right? So we price time machines. Building housing is a little bit cheaper. So we're going to go with that. So, right, so we're behind the curve. This city council and this mayor, they get it. I've been talking about homelessness in Long Beach for a long, long time. Prior councils and administrations, they was like, yeah. They didn't care. They were not trying. They were focused on other things. I don't think they saw the wave coming. We've had kind of a perfect storm. We had a recession where you got the skyrocketing rents. We've had prison realignment of all these people coming back to communities. The state said, we're going to give you money to take care of them. Guess what happened with that? Yeah, it didn't show up. We lost RDA. That's how we were paying for affordable housing. That is gone. If anybody wants me to say more about that, I could talk about that. But that was a way that the state was letting us keep some of our tax money, our property tax money. They took it all to solve the recession in 2008, right? They didn't get it until 2012. But that's what that was for, to solve the recession. But we don't have that money anymore. What money do we have? Not much. We haven't really figured out where's the money going to come from to build housing. So plant that plant that seed in your mind. We don't know where the money is to build affordable housing. We know where some of the money is. I mean, there's federal tax credits. There are nonprofit housing developers trying to get in here. There are some people who think they can make a profit off affordable housing. But here's something interesting that'll blow your mind. You might think, well, we have to subsidize affordable housing because the investors invest, but then they get less money for rent, so we got to pay them the difference, and they're not going to build the housing. You probably knew that part already. But you probably think that the affordable housing and the market rate housing at least cost the same to build. Maybe affordable housing is even cheaper because you don't have to put in golden toilets or whatever, right? But no, affordable housing is generally more expensive than market rate housing. Is anybody confused yet, or did you all already know that? The reason is because to build affordable housing, you're probably going to ask the government for some money, and then they put strings on it, all kinds of strings. And one of them is like prevailing wages. Well, that's good. We want prevailing wages, right? We don't want to say, oh, pay the labor less. That's just going to create more problems that we're trying to solve. But you can see it makes it difficult on the developers who have the money. They want to make some money back. Now, we can all say, well, why don't they just pay for it? They should just do it out of the kindness of their heart. Well, you go talk to them, So, right, we have to fund it, right? And so that's going to be tricky. But, again, this mayor and this council, they're different than prior mayors and prior councils. They're more progressive, they're younger, they're more diverse, and they get it. They never stop talking about this subject, and not just talking, even though I know everybody goes, talk is cheap. That's what we do, is we talk. Even when you're passing a law, you're just talking, right? But this is all the time being discussed and policies happening. We've had tenant relocation assistance kicking in August 1st. That was not easy. That was like from the teeth of a pit bull to get that through. It took a long time, not just the last few months. It took a long time, all right? We got the inclusionary zoning conversation is happening. In fact, this Saturday there's a workshop from 10 to noon at Roosevelt Elementary School about inclusionary zoning. This is the last public workshop before they kind of bring the findings back to council at the end of the summer. But that's inclusionary zoning, meaning that developers have to either build affordable housing or give some money to the city so we can fund some affordable housing, right? So we're looking at that policy, and the mayor in the state of the city said he expects that policy to come before council and he wants them to adopt it. That's what he said in January. So it's been moving along. It's a complicated policy, but it's moving along. The state's talking about non-discrimination based on Section 8. Right, so when I was first working even when I first came to the village at the beginning of 2017, not that long ago, we were still giving people vouchers and they would find housing within a few weeks or a couple of months. Now, forget it, the voucher expires. They have a voucher, they go all over the place. Nobody wants them anymore. They don't need to take them. That market's hot, they don't want to deal with it. A lot of the landlords don't. Right or wrong, right? They just don't. So the state's looking at some policies to address that. People say, well, these folks don't want help. Right? I've never met a person who, if you said to them, here's the keys, I got a place right now, it's at, the corner of, Ocean and Cherry, it's a single, it's all for you, it's got a kitchen and a bathroom, the rent is paid for the next year, here you go, here's the keys, look, your name's on the lease. Everybody says yes to that. But this may shock you, the outreach workers down at the river, they don't have that. They don't have the keys, they don't have the lease, they don't have anything. They have, hi, I'm here to be your friend. I'll come back in a week. If you want to talk and give me a lot of information, then maybe a few months down the road you might possibly qualify for a program that might possibly give you enough resources to maybe possibly find housing that might possibly not be worse than jail or the riverbed. Because let me show you some of this housing. I've walked into housing with some of my clients and seen people just openly, here comes a content warning, openly masturbating on the bed. And they saw me and they just kept going. And there's a pit bull that wants to kill me and someone had to take it out of the room. So here's my client, a victim of sexual predation, is going to live in this, by the way, sober living home. Right? In case you don't know, sober living homes are a big piece of our housing solution. And most of them are not sober and they're not living. They're not homes. It's just, what I call it is homeless with a roof. Because you have no privacy, you have no autonomy, you have a roommate that you don't know and don't like. It is not safe, there are bugs, It is cold, it is hot, there's a flood. I mean, it's just terrible. It's terrible. And people would rather be homeless. Seriously. And when we say, well, then you didn't want help, that's like, imagine you were unemployed and someone's like, oh, you want a job? Here's $1 a day to dig ditches in 100 degrees for 14 hours. Are you going to take the job? I hope not. Be unemployed. It's better. Why would you want that job? That's terrible. Don't take that job. So the people down at the river, I'm like, here's the apartment. It's 10 by 10. And the guy next door wants to kill you, by the way. It's like, of course they stay by the river. And by the way, if you leave this apartment, give me all your money. Give me your Social Security check to pay the rent. Now you have no money. So of course, I'd rather be at the river with my money. In case you didn't notice, it's Southern California. You know what I'm saying? It's like maybe if it's Minnesota, there's a little more incentive to take the crappy housing. By the way, in Minnesota, they're not built out. They have lots of empty land, and it's cheap. We don't have that here. So where is this housing going, and who's going to pay for it? Again, becomes very, very problematic. In the meantime, we do what's called harm reduction. Now, of course, there's people out there who say, well, that's the wrong thing to do. Make it crappy to be homeless, because it's not crappy enough. If you make it even worse, then these people will just take substandard housing. I mean, I guess that's one approach. Oh, you don't want the substandard housing? We'll just come and bother you every day, and we'll give you no services, so you have to take the substandard housing. I mean, I guess if you're like, that's government by sadism or something. I don't know what that is. How about if we just make some better housing? But it's hard, right? That's going to be the process. So that's what we're doing. We're making progress. It's slow. One thing that we're doing that's really important, I got this email today. I was like, oh, look at this podcast. Malcolm Gladwell is talking to this homeless advocate, and this is what is going to work for Long Beach. And so I read this transcript of this podcast, and it was just describing exactly what we're doing. It was like, you have to have the police at the table with the social service agencies, you have to have all the electeds on board, you have to have the churches, you have to have the fire department, you have to have the hospitals. That's what we have. They meet every month, they sit down and they meet, and they actually talk about particular clients, although that's hard because of confidentiality. You start to get into the weeds and you realize that there's some obstacles that you might not think of. Just for example, we have, we say high utilizers, or when we're not being nice, frequent flyers, right? People that just are using a lot of public services. They might call an ambulance 35 times a year, the police 50 times a year, et cetera, right? And it's a small group of people that are taking up like 10% of the public safety services, really. And most of them are chronically homeless, with a medical condition and a severe mental illness. Of course, right? So we decided that's where we can get a lot of, that's where we can do a lot of good. Let's focus on these folks. They're taking up a lot of services. They obviously need tremendous help. Let's focus on them. Okay, so St. Mary's Hospital, if you get John in your emergency room, will you call us? Because he's our client, and we'll come see him. Well, St. Mary's, well, we can't call you. That's HIPAA. That's protected health information. Okay, well, give him this form that gives permission, but then he might not sign that, right? And so these conversations with the lawyers and stuff went on for a very, very long time before we were even able to coordinate. But now they've got this multidisciplinary team, and we are actually considered national leaders in terms of coordinating city services and different agencies and collecting data and using the data to fine-tune our services, right? For example, these high utilizers, in trying to really wrap around them and help them and get them into housing fast. So that I got to go to you're going to be jealous, the National Association of Counties Legislative Conference. Right, I know. But the Capitol Steps performed, and then I got to see Ben Carson speak. So, right. So it was cool. But look, the reason Long Beach was there was because they wanted us to tell them all the good things we are doing in terms of coordinating services to reach people experiencing homelessness. And so that was pretty cool that they heard of us, and they were like, what are you guys doing? Come tell us about it. So you might go, but how can that be? Because look around and look at the issue, right? And what about these numbers from a few? I don't believe those. Now you say you're data-driven, huh? So here's the thing.
Did we miss some people in our count? I mean, there's no question that we missed some people. Is it 5 people? Is it 50 people? Is it 100 people? It's somewhere in there, probably. I mean, you can't count every single person. But we probably missed the same amount or a similar amount in prior years. So A, that tells you a trend is probably, the trend is probably accurate, right? It probably is about flat, even if the number's a little higher. Then, we look at the techniques and we look at the other jurisdictions and they do pretty much the same techniques. So compared to their numbers, again, the numbers might not be exactly the same, but comparatively, I think you get a pretty good idea, actually. And then you go, why so many? Why does it look like so many? We've housed 5,000 people from the streets into permanent housing. 5,000 people in Long Beach in 4 years. That's really good. And by the way, let me just say, permanent housing. Yeah, now that doesn't mean some of them may lose it, right? They may blow it or whatever. But yes, moving them into permanent housing, not into a shelter or sober living, but into real housing. And here's my friend Diego, who works at the Village and helps. I'm embarrassing him now, but helped with that test. There may be a couple of other housing folks in here. I don't know. Thanks, Diego. But meanwhile, the numbers are flat because 56% of people out there are newly homeless. So that tells us, something with prevention, right? Something with rental assistance. Prevention, tenant relocation assistance is a really good way to address newly homeless, or it's one good way that may be helpful, right? We do use data in that way, but Lincoln Park closed about a year ago, and it used to be on the river. If you go down to the river on any of these bridges, and you look down and north or south, you will just see tents endlessly. And you see hundreds and hundreds of people camped out there. And that was the way, it was like that for years. And then, actually, the city started saying to the county, you have to cut, because that's county, the river is the county's. It's not the city's jurisdiction. County, you got to get in here, this isn't good, and it's really not safe. Somebody actually drowned. I don't know if you remember, a few years ago, a person who was homeless at the river drowned when the river rose in the rain. So the county now is down there like every 2 or 3 months, and they just clear everybody out. They say you have 24 hours to get out. So where all those people go? In your backyard, in your alley, on the corner. That's where they go. And so, I think that's part of it. I also think downtown, you've noticed, is a little more active than it was, say, 5, 10 years ago, right? Think it's just about 3rd Street, between Long Beach and Pine. Well, there was nothing there 10 years ago. Like literally nothing there. And now, there's 10 businesses in that strip. That's like the hippest part of town or whatever. And I think that tends to disperse, folks who are on the street. They feel less comfortable. Whether by design of the people who are not homeless, whether they come and purposely make those folks feel uncomfortable, or whether they just feel like, there's a lot of people around here and we need to go away. And so I think that may be part of it too. The downtown kind of happening is pushing folks out. So it may therefore seem like there's more folks. I don't know if I have to say this to this group, but I'll say it anyway because, backtrack. Isaac said to me, give us some takeaways. What can we do? What can we in this group do? And, my first answer to him again was like, because the truth is, a lot of people say, can I volunteer? Well, there's feedings and there's food banks and things like that where they occasionally need a hand. But a lot of this work is like this ongoing outreach to people who are really struggling, with mental illness, with substance abuse, with trauma, with mistrust of the system. It takes a high level of skill, a lot of training. We got to keep you safe. We got to make sure you understand confidentiality. It's a lot to invest in volunteers. If you guys have worked with volunteers, God bless volunteer energy, but you have to know they come and go. That's just what it means to be a volunteer. I'm not giving you a paycheck, so. So it's tricky. The outreach is so intensive. One of the things that really helps is relationships. I know Diego will tell you about this, man. If you go down and you meet somebody and you're like, I'm not going to come back next week, but another volunteer will come back. I don't know who it is. They don't want to hear that. They don't trust you. Maybe after, we say it takes 16 or 17, 18, 19 contacts before somebody will even, give you their name sometimes. Really. But certainly before they're going to come sit down in the office, see a psychiatrist and whatever else. So, having new volunteers come in all the time, it just doesn't work. And it actually be counterproductive because then they just start to go, forget it. It's just a new person every week. None of these people are committed to me. I got a guy in one of my classes. I teach human services at Dominguez Hills, and I got a guy in one of my classes who works at MHA where I used to work. So he's always updating me on what they're doing, and he tells me, he goes down and people tell him, here's another content warning. I know I don't need to give this content warning, but people tell him fuck off, right? And I got used to content warnings being a teacher, but people tell him fuck off. I don't want to talk to you. And he goes, okay, listen, I want to respect that, but I'm gonna come back tomorrow anyway, because I really want to connect with you. And after he does that 3 times, 4 times, they'll start talking to him. So you can see how tricky it is with volunteers. It's just a different thing. So what can you do then? Well, I think that there's really 2 things. One is to spread the proper information, and 2 is to support when we say this is what we need to get to the next level. We would hope that we can have support for that. So let me say more about that first one though. I've talked a lot about different myths that are out there, different perceptions. A lot of people want, for example, like enforcement. To say, well, just if you just would lean on these people, I think we talked about this a few minutes ago, if you just lean on these people, then they'll accept the crappy housing, or, the non-help that we offer them. Or sometimes the good help that we offer them, but that they don't trust, because they've just been through the ringer. So 2 things about enforcement. One, you can't really do it if you can't offer shelter. That's a court decision. That's a federal court decision. If you can't say to this person, I have shelter for you, then unless they're committing some serious crime, all you can do is kind of move them on or tell them, I'm going to come back and your possessions can't be here. But you're not going to arrest them if the crime is basically homelessness. You're not going to arrest them for that. So the cops know that. We also know that even misdemeanors, how long are you going in jail for? 2-3 days. Now you can come out more traumatized. So that's not fixing housing. People say, what about involuntary hospitalization? If you're not imminently dangerous to yourself, we don't do that. And I don't think we want to go back to the bad old days where, anybody who was mentally ill or anybody who's homeless, that's it. You're in jail, you're in a psych hospital forever. We don't want to do that. It could be that making it a little easier to hospitalize people would be helpful in some cases. It could be. The conversation has mostly been around medical. So you'll run into people with mental illness, they have a gash in their leg, or they have untreated diabetes, or they're going blind of something treatable and they won't go to the doctor. They say, well, we should be able to force them. I don't know. You run into some issues of personal freedom and autonomy. You probably run into religious freedom at some point. But let's say we force those people to get medical treatment. That's not solving the problem of people with mental illness on the streets, because we're not going to force them all into treatment. They know what that is like. And that's why they don't want to go, and that's why it doesn't really help. You put somebody in a hospital 3 days, 14 days, 30 days, what happens when they come out? At the best, you stabilize them and nobody got hurt and they're back where they were. At the best, they're back where they were. But a lot of time, it's 2 steps back, because they've been through the ringer in a psych hospital. It's not a fun place to be. And they've lost time, and they may have lost a job, or money, or their housing, or their boyfriend, or whatever. So the hospitalization doesn't solve it either, right? And there's no beds, by the way. So it's complicated, involving many, many entities, many stakeholders, county, state, federal, city, nonprofit, for-profit. It's complicated. It's going to take a minute. But enforcement isn't the answer. Hospitalization isn't the answer. The answer is to create the housing and continue to connect with these people as individuals, every single one of them, and come up with a plan for every single one of them, and then implement that plan no matter how long it takes. But it'll take some time. I think the good news is that we're doing it. We really are doing it. Nobody is saying, this isn't our problem anymore. Nobody up at City Hall is saying, well, the homeless people, it's their fault. There might be some people up there that think that for some of them it's partly their fault or whatever, but I think what everybody can agree on, and this is what I say to every group, not just you guys will get this in a second, but I say to the neighborhood groups and anybody that I'm talking to is we can agree on 3 things, right? First of all, we're all compassionate. And I'll say that to people even if I don't think they're that compassionate, right? Because they probably think they are. So, right? So, we're all compassionate. 2, we would like to see all these people housed. And it doesn't matter if you want to see them housed because you think housing is a human right and it breaks your heart, or if you just are tired of seeing that guy in front of your house. I don't care what your reason is. You want to see him housed. You want to see him not on the sidewalk, not panhandling outside your favorite coffee shop or whatever. And maybe some of us are happy to see them out there, as we know them, and we say hello, and I'm happy to give you money, come and get a cup of coffee, right? But we'd still rather have a house. So whatever your reason is, we want everybody inside, we all think we're compassionate. And number three, we'd like to save money for the taxpayer. We'd like to see that money spent on something else, if it could be. We'd like to spend as little money on this as possible, but to have the desired effect of getting everyone in housing, right? We don't have to spend money that we don't have to. Everybody can agree on that. Great, so guess what? Doing nothing is the second most expensive thing. Police and hospitalization, that's the most expensive. Doing nothing, second most expensive. What's the cheapest? Get people in housing. How can that be? Well, because when you leave them out there and you do nothing, it's not actually doing nothing. It's police and hospital. Eventually, that's what that is too. So doing nothing doesn't help. It's just a drain on everybody. Got to build the housing. That's the message that I'm trying to get out to everybody in this city. If you can help, amplify that message, that's fantastic. But those goals are all aligned. Saving money, getting people in housing, and being compassionate, they're all aligned. That's pretty lucky. You can't always say that, right? So that's the message I want to get out there. I think I've kind of run out of talking points now. So I'd be really happy to take any questions. Oh my goodness. Okay. Yes, please.
So, I've been active in the progressive community in Long Beach for longer than you've been alive, obviously.
I'm 48, if that helps.
You're younger than myself. So, one of the things that has been surprising to me around the homelessness issue is the NIMBYism of, quote, progressives. And because I live in a nice suburban part of Long Beach, confronted all the time in my nice efforts to make change. So talk about how we can address that issue.
Yeah.
It is a NIMBY issue. They don't see it. They think that they are progressive, but they'll be able to see in my backyard if it gets dense, if the housing density increases.
Right.
So don't go naked in your backyard is my answer, but that's not really good.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, it's a big barrier, and part of it also is that the law is often on their side because there's certain kinds of developments that they kind of get a veto.
Yes,
of.
right.
That's probably going to change. I think that this California legislative session that may change. I have a good sense that may change at least around the margins. Some changes, I think. I hope. I think, the conversation that we're having here tonight needs to happen in all those neighborhoods where we're saying, look, I know you don't want here, but you want the people housed. This is what's going to cost us money, and hopefully you change people's minds with that. I think you take people to some of these developments. You maybe take them to villages at Cabrillo. Well, you take them to some of these that we're going to open up in Center City. Maybe you take them to meet some individuals one-on-one. I think it's a lot of legwork. But I think, if we have the grassroots actively doing this, what is it they say, each one teach one. So, or what was that shampoo commercial? And I told two friends, and I told two, you remember that one? I'm dating myself too. You know what I'm talking about? So, right, but look, if you all go and you tell two people, you recruit two people, they recruit two people, it becomes the whole city really fast.
Right.
So, we're not going to convince everybody, but I think at some point the good news is the political will is upstairs now, even without anybody convinced, we're going to do it. We're going to do it in one way or another. We're going to do it. We're going to get help from the state. The city's going to push, and we're going to do it. But I think we have to keep talking to our friends, giving them the right information, taking them to places where they can see.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so my question is, I read that in the homeless count that was just done, that over 50% were homeless for the first time.
56, I believe, yeah.
And so I'm wondering, I know a lot of what you were talking about are like chronic homeless that we've seen on the streets for a long time over and over again. What about what's being done to prevent, like when people know that they're like one rent away from being homeless? I mean, are there services that help these people get placed before they even become homeless, or?
To that question, I would say no, not really. And the reason is because whatever we would put that person in, there's somebody on the street right now, who's kind of in front of them in line because we want to get the person off the street. And we're still hoping you're going to hang on and stay in your housing. There are programs to help people stay in their housing, but not enough. and it's something that we're talking about, how are we gonna improve that?
That's a big statistic.
It is, and I think that may have been one of the few pieces of data that came back and made us go, huh, like that we weren't really quite anticipating. I don't think, I know I wasn't, that it would be quite that high. I think we knew it would be high, but not quite that high. I think that has to do a lot with the rent. I think the tenant relocation is a piece of addressing that. We have some ideas, none that I'm ready to say right now about, but just kind of getting a little more funding in that department, not actual like city department, but in that area to that issue, to try to keep people in housing. I think that's a really tough one. There's a program called rapid rehousing that's kind of focused to really quickly get people back in. Because the longer you stay on the streets, the harder it is to get back in. So we know this is one of the areas that probably needs the most attention right now. A lot of the other stuff